you boos and ghouls out there in YouTube land. This is Jen. And in today's episode, I posed a question a few weeks back asking you guys, what do I do with my Tales from the Crypt retrospective? Because longtime viewers know when my channel got nuked, I was right in the middle of talking about every episode of Tales from the Crypt. And it took a lot longer than I thought it would. And when my channel got nuked, all those videos are gone, and when I decided I was going to come back, it just felt kind of weird to me to just pick up where I left off, because I've talked about some of the really great episodes, and it just feels weird to, start in the middle of season 6 and have nothing to show for it from all the other past seasons. So I went to you guys and asked you guys, what do you guys want me to do? Do you want me to keep trucking, or do you guys want me to wipe the board clean and start from the beginning? And unanimously, and how many times can you say that in this world? Unanimously, each and every person that left a comment or got in contact with me said, Jen, start from the beginning. I think it'd be better for you just to start fresh. And, I don't mind having to rewatch the whole series from the beginning. It's a treat. The Tales from the Crypt series holds a very special place in my heart. And it's not just in my heart. I think if you are an 80s or 90s kid, if you grew up in that era, I think that Tales from the Crypt holds a special place in a lot of our hearts. I would even go so far as to say that Tales from the Crypt is basically the Gen X's and Millennials equivalent to the highest bar of the Twilight Zone. I think the parallels are very much similar. It's basically the same thing, just packaged in a new, sleeker HBO kind of way. You have a very dynamic host, you have compelling stories, and much like the Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, while it is for the most part horror, there are a handful of episodes in Tales from the Crypt that kind of stray away from horror. You have some episodes that are downright noir. There's episodes that have a hell of a very large dollop of humor in it, very black humor, but humor nonetheless. It's not just horror, and I think that is what makes it so great and stand out from other series that were like that. And I'm not disparaging some other series, because Tales from the Crypt was not the only thing us 80s and 90s kids grew up with for horror anthologies. We were well fed back in the day for horror anthologies, kids. We had Tales from the Dark Side, we had The Hitchhiker, which was another HBO project, we had Freddy's Nightmares, we had Monsters, that's a real, old throwback one, and those are all one. We even had Friday the 13th series, and those were all really fantastic anthologies in and of themselves. But there's something special about Tales from the Crypt, and I noticed that if you're a child of the 80s or 90s, you love them. Even if you're not a horror person, I've known people who actually love this damn show, and even though it was made for an adults, in fact, if you guys remember, they would have a warning before they would play the show that would say, warning, this show may be too intense for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. And you saw Crypty sitting there in his crawly crypt. And, despite the warnings, I think just as many kids were watching it than their parents. And I know a lot of people that Sopranos wasn't the only show that people would get just HBO just for that show. I knew a lot of people back in the 80s and 90s that specifically got the subscription package to HBO just for Tales from the Crypt. And probably porn too. I'm sure there were some fathers out there that wanted to get the Skinamax as well, but also not just the porn, but they also wanted Tales from the Crypt. And it was a dynamic show, and it's kind of where I also got my start on YouTube. First video that I ever did that really hit, and it was very early on, was Tales from the Crypt, my favorite top 10 Tales from the Crypt episodes. And that video is rough, guys. I'm not exactly sorry that one's gone, but despite how wet behind the ears I was with that particular video, it still did pretty gangbusters, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and people seemed to like it. And that's kind of what gave me the idea to do this retrospective. And it just seems like people in the community that are around my age just hold Tales from the Crypt with such a reverence, and I can understand why. And we all get excited. And the one continued comment that I hear when everyone's talking about Tales from the Crypt is they never get tired. They can watch this series over and over. They've seen these episodes over and over, and we never get tired. They still delight us, and they still hold up pretty well, just like a lot of other anthologies from the past. One of the cool things about Tales from the Crypt is you get a lot of, at the time, some very up-and-comers that were going to be in a very short time big stars. And you also had big stars also behind and in front of the camera. Michael J. Fox, Arnold Schwarzenegger, just to name a few. Brad Pitt, when he just right before people started to take notice, are all showing up. And also beloved names. Catherine O'Hara is in episodes. Richard Lewis is in episodes. Tom Hanks is in an episode. You have beloved character actors. You have the great legend Tim Curry himself doing multiple roles in one episode. I mean, and not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera, you had some big heavyweights, including Robert Zemeckis, that was dealing with the show. This show is something that it seems that none of us 80s and 90s kids get sick of, and I thought it's time to show it some love. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the first episode of Tales from the Crypt, The Man Who Was Death, and that was first aired on June 10th, 1989. I was just a little kid at the time. I don't even think I was in double digits yet. I think I might have been about 9 or 8 when it first premiered. Yeah, it's an old show, guys. What's interesting about this particular episode of Tales from the Crypt is it's not a particularly horror-centric episode. The main star of this episode is William Sadler, which is interesting for a lot of reasons, guys, because this won't be his last episode that he appears in Tales from the Crypt. And interestingly enough, he's playing death in this. He plays an executioner in this episode, and when he comes back, I believe in season 6, in an episode called Assassins, he's actually also playing death. But in this first episode, The Man That Was Death, he has a country boy's accent. When he shows up in a wraparound segment for the Assassins, he's going to have a much more Swedish accent. And it's very interesting, the parallels of him playing an executioner and then literally playing death in another episode. I think that is super cool. And William Sadler is the reason to watch this episode, because while I love this episode is really paper thin, guys. There's not a lot of meat on its bones, but to be fair to this episode, that's going to be something that you're going to hear a lot about Tales from the Crypt. And I don't even mean it in a negative way, because they still manage to do so much with what little they have. It's just, let's be honest, guys, these stories are not exactly, we're not dealing with William Faulkner for these kind of episodes. They're down and dirty. They were taken from comic books and turned into television episodes. But the meat on these bones are not very thick, but they're still very tasty. And like I said, William Sadler is the reason to watch this episode. And another cool thing about this particular episode is he breaks the fourth wall almost during the whole episode. And it's really, really cool how he does this. And he's just talking to the audience all the time. And what he is he is William Talbot. And he is someone who, his job is to execute people. And he likes electricity. He's a good old country boy from Oklahoma, and he likes electricity. And he got on a job at the jail and was working on the generators, and then worked his way up to executioner. And he really loves his fucking work. And, there's something about the way William Sadler plays this character, because, again, it's kind of creepy how much the guy enjoys his work, but he says things that, maybe that you're too polite to say out loud, but people think. He has a line in this episode that they're talking about women, where he says, you treat whores like queens and queens like whores, and you never have any problem. And then he goes, and just don't ever fall in love with them, because they'll kill you. And if you do fall in love with them and they allow you to stay, they hate you. Funny, ain't it? And he just has this very folksy way about him, and there's a coldness to the character, but he's still somewhat likable, and you might kind of go, I shouldn't think this, but you think it none the same, and that is probably why this episode worked so well. And interestingly enough, we might have not had William Sadler as our lead, because who they were thinking of getting, it was a toss-up between Christopher Walken or John Malkovich, which would have been interesting. I would have liked to see either one of those, but I actually think William Sadler nails this audition so well, and how he got the part. He actually auditioned for another character in the episode, and how he got the part was he asked to try out for the lead, and Walter Hill, who was the director of this episode, told him he had the job, but he had to do it exactly like how he did it in the audition. And man, it was fucking flawless. And like I said, there's not much meat to this story. What this story is about is he's an executioner, and he doesn't have much compassion. And he talks about how it's bullshit about, when people are executed, how their eyes pop out, or black blood leaks from them, or they start foaming at the mouth. He goes, sometimes, their heads smoke after it's all said and done, which ain't too pretty, but a lot of the other stuff is bullshit. And I love the line. My favorite line in this whole episode is when he says, now they say the electricity works so fast that your brain is cooked automatic, like as soon as the switch is hit, and the prisoners don't feel a thing. And he takes a long pause, and he goes, God, I hope that's not true. And again, it's chillingly cold, but there's something endearingly about the way he says it. It's like a little kid, finding out that there might not be a Santa Claus, and the disappointment in his voice oozes out into your screen. And but the tables have turned, like in all episodes that we're going to be diving into. The tables soon turn on our poor executioner, because and it was a hot button topic of the times. Another thing that I really applaud Tales from the Crypt about is that it tackled really big social issues of the times. The death penalty has always been a hot button topic in society since the very beginning, and people have always asked, who has a right to take a life, no matter what a person has done. And our executioner has very strong feelings about this, and he thinks that if you do the crime, then you should do the time, and you should go to the chair. And he has very strong opinions. He says, it's not lethal injection or gas. That's something you do for a rabid dog or a sick animal, not for a man. And like I said, he's really good at his job, but because of public outcry, suddenly the world turns, and it's illegal to do the death penalty anymore. And he's out of a job. And even though this story is very paper thin, one of the things I like about this story is he also, at the very beginning, when we see the first person he's executing, the guy, goes crazy because he doesn't get a raise and kills his boss. And, it's because of a job and money is why the guy killed. And now our executioner is on the other side, and he thinks he can get his old job back working on the generators, but he can't, because the prisoners know what he did, and also he trained somebody else. And so now he's out of a job. And how he whiles away the hours is he goes to other courtrooms and listens to people get off scot-free. And he thinks that because the death penalty electricity is no longer an option. It's not deterring people. And so he decides to literally take the law into his own hands when he's at a courtroom trial and sees this guy getting off. And you hear him goes, but he murdered my brother. And it was only on a technicality that the guy got off. So our executioner rigs up something and literally kills him by electrocution. It's always by, all of his means of death are by electrocution. And we see him do this with a couple of people, and the cops start to think, okay, there's a pattern here, and he gets caught. And the end of the episode is he is in the electric chair because all of a sudden, and it's amazing how quickly it goes from being outlawed to being back in vogue again. The Tales from the Crypt has always played very fast and loose in the reality part of it, but that's also part of the fun. But as soon as he gets caught, a death penalty's back in vogue, and he's going to be riding old Sparky to eternity. And like in the beginning of the episode where one of the prisoners was like, the governor's going to call, now William Talbot is on this thing and telling the guards, and you sons of bitches, the governor's going to call. It's a wonderful performance by William Sadler, and that is really the reason why this episode works so well. I haven't talked about our Crypt Keeper either in this episode, and you can tell this is still the very first episode, although it was all through the house that was actually the first one that was shot. This was the first one that was actually aired, so I count this as the first one. And you can see that while Crypty, there's certain things about him, that laugh, that iconic laugh is there. He's a little bit more subdued in this episode. He's not quite as punny as he's going to turn into. He hasn't quite gotten to his Freddy Krueger kind of stage yet. I think they were kind of going for a little bit more sinister in these original episodes and stuff, and trying to make him a little bit more darker and a little bit more scary. And I think they figured out that maybe humor would work a little bit better. He still makes puns, don't get me wrong, but he's not quite what we think of as we think of the Crypt Keeper as we go along into the seasons. But it's still a fucking fabulous. And the director of this episode, Walter Hill, is an interesting choice because, like I said, this doesn't have a whole lot to do with horror. This is very much more of a noir, but it's a good pick because Walter Hill, for you kids who don't know, was the director of both 48 Hours movies. That was his biggest claim to fame. Absolutely no other horror connection, which is weird. He had I don't know why they wouldn't at least have some sort of guy do something for horror, since this is a horror show.
Are you taking the fucking piss?
Oh yeah, he did do those little spooky movies in space with them. They're aliens, if you want to count that, I guess. Also, our writer, Robert Renew, also wrote The Hitchhiker, as well as The Demolition Man and Action Jackson. And these two really work well together and crafted a really good story. And Walter Hill really gave us a great direction. And I think it was a brilliant choice to cast William Sadler. Overall, this is a really fun episode. It's not one of my all-time favorites, but I think it's a very great start to this show, and you can see where we're going. And like I said, this is a great performance by William Sadler, and I like how we've sort of come full circle back in season 6. He's playing death in the very first episode, and he comes back in a very different incarnation of death in season 6 episode, and I think that is very cool. And he gets to actually interact with the Crypt Keeper, which not very many of the stars got to do. A few of them did. Whoopi Goldberg did, Arnold Schwarzenegger did, and a couple others got to interact with him. But not very many got to actually interact with in the wraparound segments, so it's cool that William Sadler is one of the few. As for a personal rating of this particular episode, I'm going to give it a strong B+. It's a great start to the series, and the reason to watch it is definitely William Sadler. A great direction, and you can see what this show is forming and why it's still a standout classic all these years later. Shit, we're way over 20-year mark, and it is still it holds up just as well as it did back in the late 80s. And if you've never seen The Man That Was Death, I would highly recommend it. It's a fun one, and the reason to watch again is the great William Sadler. And I guess that is all I have to say about The Man Who Was Death and this particular episode of Tales from the Crypt. But join me next week as and it's actually kind of perfect because we're in November right now, kids, and we're heading to the holidays. And our next episode is going to be all about the holidays in an episode called All Through the House. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts on that one, tune in next week. And as always, kids, thank you so much for watching. Remember, keep watching and talking horror. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys real soon. Thanks again for watching. I love you guys. Bye.